Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kimberly Moffitt, serving as the interim dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our panel this afternoon that is titled Amidst Great Change: Why a Career in the Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences is Rewarding and Valuable. And of course, I love being able to say that and say that often, because as the interim dean of this college, I can't think of something that I enjoy talking about more, is all of the good work that happens in our college, and even more so that happens because of the faculty that are in our college, some of which you will hear from today. And that is quite a joy for me to be able to hear from colleagues of mine that I enjoy listening to their work, knowing what they're doing in terms of their research with our students, and knowing how committed they are to UMBC. And then also, I love the opportunity to reconnect with our alumni. Over the last year, we haven't been able to do that much in person, but I'm looking forward to the fall where our alumni will be able to engage with us. Yes, certainly maintaining aspects of this online experience, but even more so being able to be in each other's company. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce Dr. Charles Tott Woolston as the moderator for this evening's event. Dr. Woolston started at UMBC in 1968 as the director of admissions of a very young UMBC, and then retired in 2000 after 32 years at the institution, retiring as Emeritus Vice Provost. During Tott's time at UMBC, he played a number of roles for us, which is why we are so thrilled to have him with us tonight. Again, serving another role for UMBC as moderator, but also a perpetual friend to the campus. He served as acting director of continuing education, interim vice president of student affairs, also the associate dean of arts and sciences, assistant dean of education. He also worked with the Upward Bound program, the Meyerhoff program, and the McNair Scholarship Program. Tott continues to stay engaged at UMBC by attending athletic and university events. He is one of the key administrators who laid the foundation for the university that we are to this day. Tott often refers to himself as a utility infielder for UMBC, meaning that he was always willing to work and serve wherever he was needed at UMBC. I had the pleasure of meeting him early in my initial years at UMBC as an assistant professor, when he reached out to me to ask, could he just sit in on some of my courses, whether it was the discussions about sports and media for a course that I would teach, or even the discussions for another class called Films in Baltimore. So it is indeed a pleasure to have the chance to introduce him and allow him to serve as the moderator for this evening's panel, so that you can hear the wonderful things that are happening in the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. Dr. Woolston.
Thank you, Dr. Moffitt. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm reminded of that I actually officially audited that class, Film in Baltimore, and it was my first experience being a student since graduate school, and also my first experience where I did not have to write papers or take exams. But I must assure you that I did my assignments every day. So if you were wondering, yes, I did read what I was supposed to read.
Again, what I would expect from you.
It was a wonderful class. I certainly enjoyed it, and also all of our discussions over the years. It's a pleasure to be here again as part of a UMBC presentation, the presentation for the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you 5 of the faculty members who are going to be the primary contributors today. And just to briefly tell you who they are: Dr. Anna Marie Schwartz Caballero from the Department of Modern Languages and Linguistics, Ben Grable from the Department of Art, Visual Arts and Cinematic Arts, I believe Vince has. And then Nancy Miller, who is the director of the School of Public Policy. Derek Musgrove is professor of history and affiliate professor of Africana studies, and I might add, an alum of UMBC. And finally, Dr. Jason Schiffman, who is joining us from the West Coast today. So welcome to you all, and welcome also to the alums who have joined us and others who are tuning in today and others who will later watch us on the YouTube event. So there's some housekeeping events that we have to talk about. Number one, if you need closed captions, it is a little CC on your screen, and you can click on that, and you should be aware that you are now receiving closed captions. The second thing is, if you wish to contribute while you are watching, there is an opportunity through the chat room. And while we won't be able to interact with you directly, we will be able to either hopefully answer your questions as we go through today, or finally, if not, then someone will get back to you with an answer to your question. So let's see if we can get started right away, because we have a limited amount of time and a lot to cover. And I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves and to give the three things that they think is best the way to define them. And I'll start with myself by just saying that I was born and raised in a little town on the Eastern Shore called Chrisville. And so I've been in Maryland all my life. So I love the Chesapeake Bay, and it is just, I think, part of who I am. The second thing is that I have been a lifelong educator. The process has always been fascinating to me. My family, my son is in the education field. My daughter-in-law is, two of my daughter-in-laws are, and my grandchildren, I suspect, who are majoring in English and history, might wind up in the educational field also. They are now juniors, and so that's part of my definition. And the third thing I'd say about myself is that I just love baseball. And so that most of you knew that already, particularly those who knew me. So let's start by asking Ben Grable from the Department of Visual Arts to introduce himself and give us a little bit about him.
Great. Thanks very much, Todd. And I'm very glad to be participating in this great spotlight event. And as Todd mentioned, my name is Vin Grable. I was a faculty member in the Department of Visual Arts for 32 years, and I just retired this past July and adjusting to a new life, as it were, getting a lot done. But as Todd mentioned, I was teaching in the cinematic arts concentration, primarily video art production and film history and a few other courses. I would say the three things that define me are, number one, I think of myself as an artist. I thought of myself that way since as a child. Began painting, and then I discovered video when I was a graduate student at MIT back in 1979. So that's 40 years ago when I began working in media. And that's what I brought to UMBC. And the department was already very well engaged in new media, which made the department and gave it its very distinctive identity, even in the 70s and 80s. Secondly, I would say I consider myself to be a pretty decent mediator and negotiator, and I think that's what allowed me to do reasonably well chairing the department, which I did for 9 years from 08 2015. And the third thing is I just became a grandfather. So my daughter just had her first child, and that's a great thrill for me as well. Works very well in the retirement years. So that's a little bit about me.
Congratulations. Nancy?
You're muted.
Muted.
Muted, I think.
Great, thanks, Todd, for reminding me. And it's really great to be a part of this event, and I'm welcoming everyone who's able to join us this afternoon. So as Todd said, I'm Nancy Miller with our School of Public Policy, and in terms of describing myself, I think of myself as a social science researcher, and my work focuses primarily on people with disabilities, and I have a lot of concern about their access to community-based long-term services and supports, and how those types of services are shaped in large part by what happens at federal and state levels in terms of policy. I also think of myself very much as a mentor and advisor who loves working with all of the wonderful students I've had the opportunity to meet over the years that I've been in UMBC. I've had the good fortune to work with them and to see how their careers have advanced over the year. And then third, I also think of myself as a former public servant, and I kind of bring that work forward with me in the research and teaching that I do, in that I had several years of experience at both the federal and local levels, designing, adopting, and implementing policy, and that work was focused primarily on health and long-term services and supports.
Say it again.
I think you may be muted.
You were.
I was muted. Derek?
All right. Well, thank you, Todd, and thanks to everyone else on the panel. So the three things that define me, I suppose the first is that I am proudly a UMBC lifer. I was a student at the university from 1993 into 1997, and then returned to the university in 2012 to join the faculty of the department where I was a major. And so hopefully I'll be here until it's time to go. I suppose the second thing is that I am a historian of contemporary African-American politics, and I love studying essentially my parents' generation and trying to understand them and their cohort through the archives. And then the third thing, if I could bring a little levity into it, is that I'm one of those people that they got a COVID dog. And so you may hear barking in the background, and I apologize for that in advance.
Good for you. Jason?
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Schiffman. I'm in the Department of Psychology, and I'm really delighted to be here. And I mean, part of it is because one of the things that I think defines me is my passion for working with others, and for which includes my students, but also just like being a part of community, and the fact that you all are here and that you're joining us and that we're all able to kind of be together in this forum is part of, I think, what I gravitate towards and how I would sort of define myself as being. The other things I would say is sort of my passion towards trying to make a difference in my small corner of the world, and that's around helping people that might be on a trajectory towards developing serious mental health concerns and reaching out and walking alongside them in their journey so that they may be able to live a life of their choosing, a life in the community. And maybe the last thing I would say is I think I'm pretty much defined by my love of my children, and if they're interesting and they do interesting things, then I guess I have some bit of interest left in me too. So that's me in a nutshell. Thanks again for being here.
Okay, I think it's my turn, Todd.
Todd, you're muted right now. There you go.
Okay.
You're okay now.
Yeah, okay, I can go. I'm Ana Maria Schwartz Caballero, and I'm in the MLLI department. I am very glad to be here, very happy to have seen such a a large turnout for our panel today, and I hope we can be of whatever little help we can to you. And hopefully, if you have any questions after the panel, you can send them to us via chat, and they'll get them to us. But I am again, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to know that you are part of this panel. So what defines me? I think first and foremost, I'm the fact that I'm Latina and I'm a Cuban immigrant who has been here since I came to the United States when I was an adolescent. That really underlies everything in my life that has marked my life, my work, and all of my experiences. I see myself as a teacher and as a mentor. We will talk probably a lot more about that a little bit later on. But again, it all, once I started looking at it, it all ties together in this big identity as a Latina who works with the community and works with students and tries to mentor and better the situation for all of those who work with us. Then you have one grandchild. I have 8. So that is part of my identity also. And although they're getting a little bit older, so hang on to yours while she or he is little. And finally, I tried to come up with an adjective, and I came up with stubborn, but I realized that tenacious was a lot more positive. I am a very tenacious person, but I have also, through my life, I have had the need to be adaptable. So although it may seem a contradiction in terms, it is not. I am tenacious but adaptable, and it is a quality that I have used at UMBC for the 37 years I've been here. So thank you.
Thank you. I agree with that assessment. And having known you for most of those 35 years at UMBC, let me ask Dr. Moffitt to jump in here, even though it may surprise her a little bit, and tell us about a little bit more about you, and also feel comfortable in joining in at any time as we go through the questions.
Yes, Todd, you put me on the spot. I thought I was getting to sit here and be an audience member and not a participant, but I can be very quick. I love teaching. That is what I feel like is very much my passion and purpose, which might seem a bit counterintuitive then for me to be serving as dean, but I also love supporting my colleagues, and this is another way in which to do so, in addition to teaching. I am an uber Prince fan. Those who know me know that quite well, and so all things Prince I think are golden, for sure. And then I would say that I am I try not to be, but my teenagers think that I'm quite the helicopter mom. I hover, but I don't hover too closely, but it's because similar to Jason, they are my world, and I spend a lot of time wanting to make sure that they're okay and happy.
Okay, thank you. The title of today's spotlight is Amidst Great Change, how does a degree in arts, humanities, and social sciences prove to be both rewarding and valuable? So I'm going to start by sort of combining the questions for the panel. And questions 1 and 2 is how did your career choose you? And to add to that, what advice do you have for the alums who are as they are moving through their careers in terms of dealing with the great changes that they are experiencing certainly this year and will be experiencing as we emerge from the pandemic. And so I'll again ask Ben to give us a start here, and we'll just move around again.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I kind of came into my medium as a practicing artist when I was in MIT and discovered the kind of the power and the impact of using media in different ways. Certainly, we're in the midst of, kind of an ongoing media revolution. Everything is all about what we can create and how we can use our phones, our laptops, our computers. So it's a huge kind of media landscape, as it were. And I think we all understand the good, the bad, and the ugly of using media in the public sphere, also in more artistic and commercial realms as well. So I would simply advise alumni and current students to remain involved in a lot of what happens is just learning yourselves. At the Department of Visual Arts, we would teach. We don't teach specific media. Well, we do, but we don't emphasize it. The important thing is creative problem solving. How you can approach a problem, a challenge, and then how you can solve it with your modes of thinking. Media always changes. The technology always changes. So you just simply have to move from one platform to another, as we're doing today, just trying to dealing with Zoom communication. So that's what I would say at this point, and I guess I'll jump back in later with more.
Thanks, Ben. Nancy, you want to add from the perspective of public policy?
Sure. So I was going to talk, I think, a little bit about kind of what got me into public policy, because I did not know for many years what public policy was. So just a couple of early experiences that got me here. When I was in college, I took a year in the summer and I worked at an institution for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It was in upstate New York. And I took that job because it was available paid work study position with the college that I was at the time, which was Earlham College. But what the job did really was it introduced me to people with disabilities and how they were being cared for at the time. And at the time, which was several years ago now, many people with disabilities were housed in very large institutions on the order of 2,000 beds or so. And I came to kind of understand in a very real way, kind of that kind of institutional setting, and it gave me an appreciation for the need to transform systems of care. And I will say, kind of since that early experience, there have really been a lot of changes in that area, and in terms of the way that we support people with disabilities. Just a piece in terms of what really was important in getting me here was when I went back to college, I had the opportunity, I received a summer National Science Foundation Fellowship, and it was with the psychology department, Jason, you'll like to know, at the Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis. And the purpose of the fellowship at the time was to introduce me and others to research and encourage us who had been selected for the fellowship to consider a career in research and possibly academia. And so what I did was I designed and conducted a study, and it focused on the child abuse system in Indianapolis. And I set up and conducted interviews with stakeholders throughout the system. And then I wrote a report about kind of my thoughts about how we might improve care for children and families coming through that system. And while I really, again, didn't know anything about policy research, it was very much like the kind of work one might be engaged in now as someone, as a member of the public policy community. And importantly, it introduced me to research, and I fell in love with research. I got to go all around Indianapolis, either by foot or by bus, and interview people, talk with them about their perspectives, and kind of integrate their perspectives with the available research to really think about a system of care and ways to improve it. And then the last piece, just briefly, in terms, I also did some really interesting work in terms of what kind of developed my career while I was in graduate school with Cook County government. But when I finished graduate school and I came out to Baltimore, I worked for 10 years at the what's now the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And there I really had the opportunity to see how the research that one might do is turned into policy through federal legislation. And it was at that point that I also began teaching at UMBC. And I found teaching to be a very rewarding experience with the School of Public Policy, and that eventually led to my position as a faculty member. In terms of advice, I just add a little bit to Vince and think about it, particularly from the context of kind of the training that I have and students, alumni that I work with, that I think that the skills one gains coming through a public policy program right now are really needed in a variety of settings across the public sector and nonprofit world. And I think we've really seen this exemplified by alumni that have come out of the School of Public Policy. And I would say that it's important to be open to opportunities, and I think echoing what Vin said, also to really stay connected with your fellow alumni and mentors and advisors through this challenging time. So thank you.
Seth, I'm sure has some advice for those who are also alums.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I think that when it came right down to it, you know, my career chose me for two reasons. The first is I was born in 1975, which means I grew up in the 1980s and the 1990s. And, you know, Black politics was just swirling around me. You had the Jackson campaigns. The people of South Africa were rocketing towards democratic elections. It was a really exciting time. Kwanzaa is sort of coming back as a cultural institution in the Black community. And so really quickly, I realized that I wanted to latch onto those things. I found them exciting. And so I decided that I was going to, you know, start working on African-American history as my vocation. At the same time, I happened to live next door growing up in Baltimore to the Mitchell family, specifically Clarence Mitchell III, the famous civil rights family. And his uncle, Perrin Mitchell, the first African-American congressman in the state of Maryland, would come by and visit. And I found him one of the most remarkable people that I had ever encountered in my life. He seemed like sort of a modern day W.E.B. Du Bois, come and visit my neighbors, right? And so what I understood from his life and what I understood from Du Bois and many of these other Black intellectuals that I had sort of held up as heroes was that they understood the power of history to affect public policy, to inform and affect public policy, to justify public policy. And so I essentially set out to be a public-facing historian who focused on African-American history. And when it came to issues of training, I ended up trying to keep a foot in both worlds. And so when I was at NYU doing my graduate work, I also was a fellow for the Congressional Black Caucus. So just in case the job market was really bad, I was going to go ahead and work on Capitol Hill. But what I ended up doing was interviewing about half the members of the CBC for my dissertation and then going into the professorate. But even today, largely because of the willingness of UMBC to work across disciplines, I'm able to do things like write a report on the history of the struggle for statehood in Washington, D.C., that members of Congress are reading right now as they mark up the D.C. statehood bill. And so we did that in partnership with the city and my co-author, Chris Myers-Ash, who's a good friend. My department supports that. And so I'm able to still do everything that I dreamed up back in the 80s, and it's really quite exciting.
Thank you. One of the things that seems to be appearing here in this conversation is that while we think of this period of time as being amidst great change, we've always been amidst great change in some way or another over the past 50 or some years. Just from the perspective of UMBC, that it started in 1966, and the changes that have occurred in higher education alone are just remarkable. So it's something that we're thinking about all over as being something different now. But while this may be different in the sense that it's worldwide, the changes that we're experiencing during a pandemic, this really is not unusual in the sense of people in careers having to deal with changes. Jason, how about from the Department of Psychology's perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll speak from psychology, but mostly just from my own story. So I wanted to share a little story with you about this question. I thought it was such a provocative question. How did your career choose you? And I like that question because to me, it captures this hidden reality for many people, which is like our outcomes and what we end up becoming are some part vision and hard work and some part natural inclination, but a lot of part chance. And then, of course, there's parts of privilege and other stuff. And maybe the most influential for me is a lot of parts support and mentorship in people who believed in me. So I like to think about this idea that no one gets to where they're going on their own. And I'd say for all of my life and most of my adult life, even though I've worked hard towards my goals, there's so many moments that just seemed random and were nurtured by others, which I continue to be grateful for. So, for instance, like I was always a good listener for my friends in elementary school. And this is probably mostly because of my mother, who was a good listener to me. And I remember thinking, well, maybe I'll be a good counselor and I should be a psychologist, or I didn't even know what that meant, but I thought that could be something. And then around the same time, I met this guy who I called Unc. He was my best friend's uncle. His actual name was Dr. Donald Palmer, and he just retired as a professor at Montgomery College this past year. So some of you may have had Dr. Palmer before, but he was so influential in my life. So in 6th grade, I decided I was going to be just like that guy, professor of psychology. And I had, again, no idea what that meant. But I was a good listener, and this guy was amazing to me. So that's what I sought off to do. And of course, I didn't really know what that meant or what it entailed or the details or any of that stuff. And none of that stuff even seemed relevant at the time. I just felt like if I worked hard and did well in school, then I could become Unc, or, with a splash of my mom in there, And it wasn't until later that I began to see like the next steps I needed to take. And then I got another lucky break where in college, I partnered up, or I had the chance to work with this woman named Elaine Walker, who was at my undergraduate university, as an amazing scholar in the field and an amazing person who nurtured me and believed in me when I was making mistakes or not doing stuff well. She took me under her wing and helped inspire me to understand even more what it takes to be a professor and all of the ways in which I could contribute in that way. So I'm skipping some of the details of my story, obviously, but the long and short of it is to say I landed where I hoped I would land when I was dreaming as a kid of being a psychologist. But the position is actually very different than I had imagined as a kid. And the journey, it was like a lot of chance. It was some hard work and some privilege that I had, but the largest part of the privilege was the mentorship that I received. And no one gets to where they're going alone. And all of those things, I think they're okay. Now, I guess if I were to convey some advice as it pertained to my life, I had a plan most of the time, but I had to pursue it flexibly because I didn't really know more than, sometimes 6 months ahead of like what life was supposed to be like. And that's I think very relevant now. So have a plan, but, know that it could change and be flexible with it and foster your curiosity. The fact that y'all are here at this event seems like a really good use of your own curiosity, and use your liberal arts education to follow pursuits that are of interest to you and that you're good at and that matter and make a difference in the world.
Good advice, Jason. And now we'll go to tenacious and stubborn Dr. Anna Schwartz. Caballero.
Okay. Well, I have to say that I totally agree with Jason. I feel that I sort of evolved into my career. It was not a direct path by any means. I came to this country in the middle of my junior year in high school. And there was lots and lots of upheaval in my life, and in my family and in my world. And I graduated from high school, and I told my parents I did not want to go to college. I didn't want to keep on studying. I was living in White Plains, New York with an aunt and uncle. And I was a filing clerk. This was the job I got out of high school. And about a month into it, I started thinking about what I was doing. And together with my work experience and the fact that my parents, who did not have a college education, very strongly persuaded me to go to college, I did go ahead and enroll in university the following fall. And I chose teaching. I was an elementary education major, but I graduated from that, but I wasn't convinced. And I spent a lot of years after that trying to get away from education and trying to do other things. And I would always come back and always come back. And similar to one of Jason's stories, I was teaching at, because in the midst of that, I did a lot of moving around in the country too. I was teaching in an elementary school in Denver, and became good friends with the principal, who happened to have a heart condition. And he would have to go for treatments and for surgery. And he made me teacher in charge. So that was the title, that was the rank, was teacher in charge. So for all effects and purposes, when he was out of the building, I became the administrator. And then he said, I think you need to get your master's in school administration. And I did. And that's when I really figured out that what I wanted to do was teach. I also administration, but certainly having nothing to do with schedules. Although now I'm the coordinator for the Spanish area, and I've been doing schedules for years. That was the level where I wanted to be. That was the kind of teaching I wanted to be. I wanted to do. I was a graduate assistant, and I was introduced to the pedagogy of teaching, and that's what really set me on the path I am now. And I really did not. I didn't finish my doctorate until, it wasn't a direct path. I'm not going to tell you what age I was, but it wasn't a direct path. So what I would say is try to know yourself. I wish I had known myself a little bit better. I didn't. But if you're in college and you need to try to know yourself, what interests you, what motivates you, and then investigate how you can use it. And this applies just as well for people who have graduated and are in the work world now. What are your skills and how can you use them and where can you use them? People are very tunnel vision. Okay, I majored in this and this is what I've got to do. I majored in languages. Well, I'm going to teach. I'm going to be an interpreter. I'm going to, there are thousands of different jobs where you can use those skills, and you need to investigate, but you need to know what really gets you going, and then pursue it. And you will find a lot of different bends. You will also find a lot of different mentors, like the one who told me he thought I was going to become an administrator, but if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't have met the woman that I did when I got my master's in administration, who got me in this path that I am in now. So, thank you.
Thank you, Anna Marie. I kind of like that title, teacher in charge. As opposed to, so the next question, again, which we will ask everybody to chime in on, is what in today's landscape why in today's landscape is a degree in your particular field or major important? And I give you a little opportunity here, I guess, to recruit some. Say if we have any undergraduates listening to us, or even high school students, perhaps we can you can do some recruiting here. So Ben, again, we'll go in this direction, your direction.
Okay, so in our department, we offer 3 different degrees, a Bachelor of Arts in a variety of media. We primarily present an art program from the standpoint of technical media. So we offer courses in animation, video, digital media, graphic design, photography, and we also have a print media and concentration as well. So the difference between the Bachelor of Arts and the Bachelor of Fine Arts is one in which the BFA degree allows or provides more experience from a professional standpoint. The BA is more general studies, and the BFA more directed toward specific professional tracks and paths. Our most popular concentrations are animation and graphic design. I say that being coming from the cinematic arts program, but students feel that they are going to get most out of or attain more potential by majoring in animation or graphic design. And that's probably true. There are more jobs, more opportunities in those fields. We also have a graduate program called Intermediate Digital Arts, an MFA program, which I would say is great and most useful if you are interested in teaching art. I think the greatest utilization of an MFA degree is to prepare you and give you the credentials you need for university teaching in the arts. So that's what I have in most of my colleagues. That does provide you with the opportunity to pursue your own practice in whatever area or media that happens to be, but also to fall back on the security, to take advantage of the security of a full-time university position, if you can find one, and there are many opportunities for that. So that's a survey of the degrees. I just like to add, kind of based on what Anna Maria and Jason were saying about kind of the accidental, sometimes not necessarily haphazard, but the ways that we develop or kind of bump into our careers. I think this is a result of how fast things are changing again. If you asked me, what are the greatest potential career paths in art 10 years ago, we might say, broadcast television or graphic design. But nowadays, students could be thinking about, what do I have to do to get a career or start a career in social media? That's where, a great number of people, of students as well as professionals are gearing up for that, that type of exchange and communication potential. That's where, and there's so many opportunities. Every company, every university, every school has a department or an office in dealing with social media. So that's of course that's everything about design, everything about video and media communication. So it's just one way that I think you all need to just remain alert and remain ready to pivot to to what is sometimes an unexpected shift in what in the kind of the careers and the professions that are needed.
Minutes now, so let me move along to Nancy and to talk a little bit about the potential of in your field.
Thank you. So I guess just briefly to describe kind of the degree we have and then how people are using it, how our alumni are using it now in the context of the challenging times we're experiencing. The degree in public policy at UMBC really prepares students with kind of a core set of skills, and that kind of core set of skills relates to kind of analytic skills and research method skills, but also an understanding of the political and the policymaking process, and very importantly, kind of an understanding of issues related to social inequality and how those are embedded in many policies and practices. And then students go on from that core set of courses to focus on one of several specializations that we have in areas like health policy, or education policy, or urban policy. And I could say a lot more about the degrees themselves, but in terms of the skills that it provides students with, I think we really see that reflected in the alumni of the school and the kinds of things that they've been engaged in throughout this pandemic. So one of our alumni throughout the period of the pandemic was the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Health with Health and Human Services with the federal government. And from day one was dealing with the pandemic and kind of management related to that, to the pandemic. Just as another example, so that's kind of public service in terms of kind of the skills of our program and taking it out into careers and being able to address the pandemic. We have another alumni in the nonprofit world who's the Chief Executive Officer of the American Academy of Association of Colleges of Nursing. And she has been very much involved throughout this in working with kind of what is the response of the profession, but also very much rethinking kind of what does nursing and what does like training in a school of nursing look like at a time when we're in a pandemic and in very much a virtual world. And then just as another example, we've also had alumni right in the midst of the pandemic move up in positions of academia. And so one of our alumni just became, was appointed in the College of Alameda in California, and so came into a position of being president in the midst of a pandemic, thinking about kind of how to manage an institution in this time of change. So, so it's a core set of skills that I think, to reflect some of the other comments, basically train us to kind of deal with challenges and to think through, work through, address challenges. And we've seen that play out in particular over the little over a year since we've been in our current challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll ask Derek to weigh in on the history area.
So history is a really interesting sort of case at this moment. If you look at the numbers that are coming out of the American Historical Association, the number of jobs that are available for tenure track professors on college campuses have been going down pretty steadily, while the number of people earning PhDs has either gone up or stayed level. And so there's this yawning gap between the two, which means that there's not a lot of tenure track jobs for graduates at this moment. And so what we've been doing in the department is making our students aware of that and training them for the huge number of jobs that are coming open for historians across the country. So, I'm sure we all know that the basic skills of a historian, writing, research, and critical thinking are applicable to a number of jobs coming out of undergrad, whether it be a lawyer or a policy analyst or something of that nature. And we of course stress that for our undergraduates. For our graduates, we are building into our curriculum the opportunity to gain the skills that you would need to work for the National Park Service as a public historian, to work for libraries or archives, and really to do all the things that historians are doing in the public, which is a great deal these days. You can open any paper and find commentary from a historian. Open up your Netflix and find all of these wonderful documentaries where historians are doing a lot of work behind the scenes. And we're trying to train our graduates to move into those areas so that they can remain historians and use that wonderful skill set that we've trained them for. And of course, our faculty are producing work in those areas as well. And so Ann Rubin has produced, I think, 3 beautiful websites that deal with historical topics to date. We've got people like Christy Chapin, who's talking to members of Congress about health policy, and so we're practicing as much as we are preaching this sort of pivot for historians in this odd moment.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, Derek, and we'll go now to Jason.
Well, I think if there's one thing that I want anyone that's paying attention to remember, it's, just kidding, I don't have that. I'm pretending to be frozen. So I'm not really frozen. I don't have one pearl of wisdom to share. I would just say that I've just been moved by hearing like all of the inspiring ways in which people that are pursuing their own passion are making a difference in the world. And that is maybe something to hold on to. So, it's no different in psychology. We're trying to make our corner of the world better, just as everyone has shared in their own ways. And the idea that we have the privilege of learning how to learn and learning how to think and thinking about how to learn. These are, I think, threads that tie us all together on this panel. And in psychology, it's maybe a focus on interpersonal interactions and working with other people. But it's all about like nurturing your curiosity. And the fact that you all showed up to this event shows that you have some love of learning. And I would say that's what, is required for success in the future and for happiness, which is maybe the aspiration that we should all maybe be striving towards. But anyway, the last thing I'll just say is like, through psychology, you can really get a grasp as to the context that surrounds people. And if you can understand what surrounds people or what motivates them or what challenges that they are struggling with, you might find more room in your own self to believe in them, to prop them up, and to maybe mentor them, and thereby bring further good into the world.
Thank you. Good words from you, Jason. And now finally, Anna Marie.
Okay. Well, I just want to remind you that we have gone into this horrible pandemic period, but we're also coming out as a nation out of our xenophobic mindset. And that is a wonderful thing for those of us who work internationally and work with language. So this is a great time for those who want to study languages, who want to develop their skills to very advanced levels. But as I said, at the same time, what else? You know, just speaking is not a job, okay? Speaking what? Speaking with whom? Speaking in what context? Writing in what context? Okay, so what are your passions, language, and what else? What else are you interested in? And more of our students are double majoring. We have lots of students who are majoring in language, but are also doing biological sciences, who are also doing engineering. People all over the STEM fields, much less other departments in CAHSS. So you have media and communication studies, you have global studies, which is obvious. In psychology, I get so many requests from your department, Jason, for people who can speak Spanish, who can help translate, who can deliver surveys, who can do so. This is a wonderful, an essential skill to have, that and it's not just in language, but it also gives you a worldview. Knowing a language, knowing that culture, gives you a worldview that is key. This world may be very apart right now, but it's really it's very small. So those are my little words of wisdom.
Well, thank you all, and we're approaching the end of our hour, and it's and I would like to, not to pick on Anna Marie, but I like the words tenacious and flexible, along with the fact that communication has been almost running through what everyone has said here, and also the fact that while change has been dramatic in the past year or so, it's always with us, and the flexibility and the tenaciousness and passion that you bring to any career is really going to make you successful, I think. So, wrapping up, I need to do a little housekeeping, and to thank for particularly the panelists. This to me has been very, very inspirational, and I think it's been very informative for those who are tuning in to get a feel for maybe a change in a career, or how to change within a career. Also like to thank Dr. Moffitt and the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and their collaboration with in partnership with the Office of the Alumni Engagement, which has been really a good aspect of the Spotlight series, I think, as it's gone through the year. And while this is the end, I'm sure, while this academic year, I'm pretty sure it won't be the end of this kind of dialogue, or dialogue and conversation. It's been a special pleasure for me to serve in this role as moderator, for actually my first time on a Zoom screen this way anyway. And to engage again with some of my old friends from, I don't mean that in the age sense, but friends for a long time, and to meet some new folks today, and you've all really helped me understand a lot of. I've been around the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and people in that for a long time, and it's been a pleasure again to be a part of this today. And I thank the alumni folks for helping me, to inviting me to be a part of this. So let me finish with a simple statement. anyone who is listening, the statement that I will make to anyone who listens to me, UMBC is a very special place, and you should look into it if you haven't already. And so I will say goodbye and stay safe, stay positive, and test negative. Goodbye.